The president's thought on the markets and your money has us scratching our heads this morning.
I don't know how you can impeach somebody who's done a great job. I'll tell you what, if I ever got impeached, I think the market would crash. I think everybody would be very poor, because without this thinking, you would see numbers that you wouldn't believe in reverse.
Okay, first of all, if you see numbers you wouldn't believe in reverse, then that would mean that you'd see numbers that you would believe. But let's leave that aside for a second. A looming impeachment and the surrounding uncertainty can have an effect on markets. There's no question about that. But for fact's sake, would the market crash if Trump were impeached? We don't have a lot of history on this because we don't have a lot of history on impeachments. But let's take a look at what we have. The impeachment of President Bill Clinton. In the fall of 1998, the market dropped. You can see that there. That's the ahead of the Starr report being released. It dropped almost 20% ahead of the report that was released by the investigator. But the report didn't contain anything groundbreaking, and the market drop settled shortly after the release. Now, when the impeachment proceedings began, get this, the S&P 500, which is what we look at, actually began to climb, gaining 28% by the time that the Senate impeached Bill Clinton, or acquitted Bill Clinton. They didn't impeach him. Market participants want certainty, and in the wake of an impeachment, there is the possibility of a sell-off, but an impeachment does by no means guarantee a crash. Joining me now is CNBC editor-at-large John Harwood. And John, the first thing we have to say when comparing things to past examples as it relates to markets and the economy is that the economy in 2018 is not the same as the economy was in 1998. There's actually a reason I didn't use the Richard Nixon example, because back in the early 1970s, the impact and the significance of the market are very different than they are now. The bottom line is there's no basis for President Trump to say the markets would crash if he were impeached.
If the president actually believes that, and he might, because his self-absorption is so complete that he seems to think that everything revolves around him. If he actually believes that, he's completely out of touch with reality. We're in, Ali, as you know, a 9-year bull market, most of which occurred under President Obama. If you take the totality of President Obama's 8 years in office, the Dow is up 149% during that time. The Dow is up about 29% during Trump's presidency so far. It is true that in 2017, there was a market boost that I think in part was inspired by the actions he was taking on deregulation, in part on the expectation of tax cuts. And so the market continued to go up late into the recovery pretty sharply last year. However, it's basically flat this year because the actions the president's taking on trade are damaging to economic prospects in the future. And so, no, the economy would not, the markets would not crash if the president left. There might be a blip associated with the uncertainty, but the markets ultimately are going to respond to economic fundamentals, corporate profitability, and that would not fundamentally change if Trump left.
The evidence of that is the last 2 years, where there have been all sorts of things that traditionally you and me would have said, wow, that's going to really affect the markets negatively, and they haven't, because as corporations continue to be profitable, markets continue to go up. Now, that could change. We are well into a period of growth. We're 10 years into a bull market almost. That independently could turn around.
Well, in fact, the fact that the Trump tax cuts front-loaded some economic activity but have increased budget deficits. And the effects of that, the effects of the president's trade policies, have a lot of forecasters upgrading the possibility of a recession by 2020. That is because of or connected with actions that the president has taken. So, yes, the economy is going to turn down at some point. We haven't repealed the business cycle. There will be a recession. But it's not going to be triggered by Donald Trump leaving office. You could make an argument that markets would feel a lot more calm and have uncertainty reduced if Mike Pence were president for the next couple of years than Donald Trump.
All right, John, good to see you as always. Thanks very much, John Harwood. Joining me now is Austan Goolsbee, former chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors for President Obama. Austan, I want to talk to you about some other stuff, but let's just stay on this for a second, because that's a good threat that the president is making to a lot of Americans. Say, well, look, the one thing you got going for you is these markets are going well. If I am impeached, it'll tank the markets. What's your take?
I think you actually missed the dynamic there. I don't think the president was engaged in an observation. I don't think he was making an economic forecast. I think he was making a threat. I think he was saying, hey, the economy's looking pretty good. It'd be a shame if somebody were to burn it down, say somebody who had control over launching trade wars, changing regulations, applying tax rates to different groups. I think everybody should take a step back and ask yourself, do you honestly think that if they move to impeach Donald Trump, he's not going to try to burn it to the ground? I think he is. And I think that's what he said in that statement.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.